Welcome to this free webinar about my book, Guiding Questions. My name is Kristen Henry. I own khliteracy.education.com. That's my business. I'm a literacy consultant. I work with language arts teachers, primarily secondary and 6 through 12, but I really work with all contents in terms of how you can integrate writing, how you can integrate reading, speaking, all of those things. So that I do across the board as well. I've also worked on goal setting. I've worked with a lot of different contents of teachers, and guiding questions is not language arts specific. So if you're have you stumbled upon this webinar, you don't have to be an English teacher. You could be any content. Guiding questions will work for any content with any teacher with any grade level. And let me tell you a little bit about. Let's see. Let me go ahead and share some information with you so you have it. Okay. So, Guiding Questions, the name of my book. I'm Kristen Henry. This is my email. You can always reach me at kristen@khliteracy.education.com. And my website is khliteracy.education.com. There's a lot of resources on there that you might want to take advantage of. So, please feel free to do that. There is a free excerpt of my book on my blog. It's one of the older posts, but so if you want to see how it reads, you can also go onto my blog and search for that. I do have an upcoming on-demand course. You can actually pre-register now. This is the website. You can reach it from my website, but it is an online on-demand course about how you can use guiding questions in your daily practice. Which is pretty exciting. It's going to go into a lot more depth than I'm going to go into in the webinar today. It's going to ask you to reflect. It's going to go into more depth into each of the questions, and really kind of give you a good starting point for what you could do. And of course, the book is available. This is a shortened to bit.ly, but it's available on Amazon.com. You can type in Kristen Henry, guiding questions, Kristen Henry, or you can use this bit.ly link. And I self-published it on Amazon last year, so it's been about a year. I should have probably celebrated that, right? I probably should have celebrated the that, but I didn't. So, how and why I developed guiding questions. So, guiding questions was a work in progress for a while, and so what I'll say, I'll put this back up here, is I was a district level administrator. So I was a curriculum coordinator. So I was over all language arts teachers and 6 through 12. And that actually I even worked with some of the bilingual and ESL teachers. So I had a wide variety of reading teachers, all sorts of teachers in grades 6 through 12. And, I did a lot of observations, and I would go in and talk to teachers after. And the goal is always, right, to have better instruction, right? You want to empower teachers and make sure that they're doing the best they can, and your job is to support them to do that. And if you've ever been a teacher, right, and if you're watching this, you're probably in education. But if you've ever been a teacher and you have had one of those really rough after, and I'm not sure why my leg keeps going out. And if you've ever had one of those really rough conversations after an observation where you just kind of felt bad and you got really defensive and you felt insulted and you felt like you weren't understood and you felt like maybe the administrator, didn't see like your brilliance or what you were planning, and they didn't give you a chance to explain it. That's why I developed guiding questions, was because, it's one of those things where you want that conversation to be productive. You want it to be a collaboration. You want it to lead to reflection and self-awareness. You don't want a defensive teacher. Like if you go in and go, oh, I didn't see this, or I didn't see that, or why did you do this? It builds a lot of defensiveness. I know I've been there where I'm like, what? Like, were we in the same lesson? Like, what are you talking about? Let me explain. And you don't get that time to explain. And that's why I developed guiding questions. So from years of being a teacher leader, but then also years of being a district level administrator and going into classrooms and talking to teachers. And, it really was eye-opening. Like, if you ask the right questions, you can set a better tone. If you ask the right questions, you can have a really great conversation. And there was a lot of stumbling blocks up until then. But what was really nice is once you kind of figure out that you need to be talking about getting teachers to reflect and for them to be aware, right? It's a lot easier for them to come up with the answer than for you to point it out and they feel like, oh, right? It seems a little accusatory. And so we don't want that. We don't want to go in and give feedback as an administrator or as an instructional coach and have teachers shut down and be like, oh, well, why am I even, right? Once teachers get defensive and shut down, that conversation is gone. There's no teachable moments. There's no moments of collaboration, like it's over. And so that's why I developed these the goal is to have a really open, collaborative, reflective conversations that drive better teacher practice. And that is, my ultimate goal. This is what we want. We want openness, trust, reflection, communication, collaboration, self-assessment on the teacher's part. Like, we want them to think about it and what they're doing. Self-awareness. We want them to be aware of what's going on in their classroom. That's where, if teachers will allow to be videotaped and things like that, they can see it, they can see what's happening in their classroom. And that's something that I recommend if teachers are willing to be videotaped. It can be very eye-opening because they get to see their blind spots. Everybody has blind spots. You just do, right? And the great thing about these questions is they lead to teachable moments. They lead, and you think about, well, a teacher has teachable moments with students, but if you're an administrator, an instructional coach, you have those moments too, or there's something that comes up in a conversation where you're like, this is where we need to work today. This is where we need to be there. So I do want to encourage you on whatever platform you happen to be on, give me a question, type in a question. I need to kind of see where I can find it. I don't see any in the chat. But please, I want this to be interactive. And like I said, I was having trouble going live, but hopefully it is now. So let me go ahead. Those are the questions. I'm going to give you a look at the questions while I go in and check to see if I have any questions. Okay, I don't know what's going on. That's all right. Okay. This needs to move. Technology is always fun, right? I always appreciate technology, but that's all right. All right, so let's go back. To the PowerPoint, and we're just gonna do an overview of, it doesn't wanna work today. Of the questions. So these are the questions and guiding questions. They are the jumping off point. These are not the end all and be all of questions, but they are the jumping off point. They will lead to follow-up questions and hopefully teachable moments. So I do recommend, I have my coffee, right? Hopefully you have your coffee too. Hopefully you'll see how these go in order, right? What was your learning goal, right? Because that, to me, that is like the basic bottom line. You need a learning goal, right? You need to know what your students are supposed to learn that day. So that's foundational. That's why I have it first. Were your students successful? How do you know? And that is, if you're going to teach them something, you need to be able to know if they learned it. And this should actually happen on a daily basis. I think that we have a lot with the standardized testing and the mini benchmarks that teachers are thinking, I'm going to test them in 3 weeks. No, you need to know today if they learned what they do today, right? So talking about formative assessment is huge. Was your instruction assessment aligned to the standards? These high stakes standardized tests, the world that we live in is all about standards. So if what we're teaching isn't preparing them for the next grade level, isn't in that large scope, we need to rethink about that, right? So we need to make sure that what we're teaching in our year is aligned, vertically, and that it meets the needs of what the kids need to learn that year, right? We have a responsibility to teach them what is designated for that year. At least that's the minimum, right? That's the minimum. I'm not saying you can't go beyond, but that's the minimum. So alignment, especially in the age of high stakes standardized testing, is very important. Then the other thing is, how did I support all students? This goes back to differentiation. Are you working with all students? Do you have a proactive plan for how you are going to help all students? And that doesn't always happen. Or sometimes we just focus on my students in special education, or my 504 students, or my English learners, but we're not thinking about, oh, my kids that already got it, right? My advanced kids, my GT kids. You need to be thinking about them too. Like, differentiation is about everybody in the class, not just your most struggling student. If you have misbehavior in your class from like that kid that's super smart in the corner, well, it's because he's bored, and we need to proactively think about how we can engage him and push his learning. So that's what I mean, differentiation, support all students. And how do you collect data to drive instruction? How are you using whatever assessment you are giving, a graphic organizer, an exit ticket, a piece of writing? How are you using that to plan tomorrow's instruction? How often are you picking up that data? How are you using your observations? Are you listening to conversations with kids? That's important stuff, right? That needs to happen every day. You need to collect. We are data collectors, right? We work in a student-focused, and it should be student-focused, student-driven business. I know a lot of people say we're data-focused. I was like, well, you should be student-focused. But there is data that helps you help those students, right? They are more than their numbers, and they're more than their test scores, for sure. But we need to be looking at a wide range of data pieces. And that does include observation and the conversations that you have with students. Just because you can't quantify it doesn't mean it's not data. So these are the 5 questions. I do recommend that we put them in this order because they build on each other. And I think we start with the most important one. And if you don't have to ask all these questions. If you need to jump to how did you support all students because that's what you're working on, that's what the coaching conversation needs to be about, that's fine, right? But it's not too hard to ask the other 3 questions and have that teacher reflect on what their answers are. I have in the back of my book some sample conversations that were based on conversations I had with teachers. Like, these are actual conversations. And so if you want to see what they could look like and where those teachable moments are and how you might react with follow-up, I do invite you to read the book and look in the back, the questions in action, and what that might look like. So if you're kind of curious, that is in the book. All right, so the first question is, what is your learning goal? Like I said, and this is really trying to get to the base of the teacher's planning process, teacher clarity. Do they understand what their students are supposed to learn? Like I said, this is foundational. If you can't answer this question as a teacher, and I've had that deer in the headlights where they're like, what? Usually new teachers. That's where we have to start. That's where our coaching conversation has to be. Is what can we learn from this question? What is your goal? What do you want your students to know today? If in order to get somewhere, you have to know where you're going, right? You can't plan how to get there if you don't know where you're going. And that's where this question leads us. And, this is where we can have that teachable moment where if the teacher is kind of struggling with this question, we can have that coaching conversation right there. We can say, okay, well, let's talk about what you want them to learn. If we're not sure why, let's go back, let's look at the curriculum, let's look at the standards, let's have a broader conversation. But it becomes a coaching conversation, right? Hey, so what was the learning goal? And then you go from there. There's follow-up, right? That's where we have that coaching, that's where we have that teachable moment. Now, if we get past that question and the teacher knows, hey, this is what I wanted my students to learn today, and the kids can say it, right? I would always go ask students when I did observations, hey, what are you learning today? And if the kids could articulate that, I knew that the teacher had really set the standard for that. So if you get from there, then you go to, were your students successful? How do you know? So how are you using formative assessment? You know, the teacher might say something like, oh, well, I'm going to look at the exit tickets and see what their answers were. I was observing them. I was listening to their conversations, that little quiz at the end. There's different ways to assess, but we want to make sure that they have a plan for assessment. And by the way, all of these questions are also great reflections for teachers. So if you're on here listening and you're a teacher, um, these are questions that you can use to reflect on your own practice. They are also questions that you can use to plan, or within your professional learning community or your planning group, you can use these to help get everyone on board. So if you're a veteran teacher, maybe with new teachers, this is an opportunity. These questions can help you too. So this is not just for instructional coaches and administrators, but for teachers and teacher leaders, whoever wants to make their instruction better. Again, I put this question second. It's very much tied to the learning goal. We're looking at teacher clarity and how this is going. This really becomes then the jumping off point to a coaching conversation about how are you using formative assessment. And a lot of times, you know, I would be with teachers, they're like, oh, well, we're going to assess in 3 weeks so during the mini benchmark. And if that, you know, that's what's driven into the heads of many new teachers, is how students do on a mini benchmark. And it's not their fault, right? That's what's been driven into them. But it becomes a coaching, conversational, teachable moment. You know, if we're not going to know for 3 weeks how our students are doing, what is the impact of that? But we can have a conversation about that. And we can have that teachable moment where we teach them, we need to be doing assessment every day. Think about how that is going to make it easier for you to fill in the gaps and intervene in real time. And so that becomes that teachable moment there. Was your instruction assessed and aligned to the standards? Again, we're looking for alignment, teacher clarity. Do teachers understand that their instruction and assessment are aligned? That the assessment needs to meet the instruction? This might be an opportunity for us to go back and look at the curriculum, at the standards, whatever your district has, and say, okay, well, let's go back and look at that unit. Let's go back and look at that our curriculum guide, our pacing guide. It's a moment to teach teachers about how to navigate curriculum, about how to work with that curriculum, about what that means. You know, here in Texas, it might be like, let's go back and look at the TEKS resource system. Let's look at that performance assessment. But it's a teachable moment, right? And if you kind of agree that this is an area that needs some work, you can go and work with that. And then, of course, we get to how did you support all students, which I said is about differentiation. And this is for both struggling and successful students. We forget about, oh, the kid that's above grade level, or like has already read like the whole series of books, and we have other students still on the first book. But we need to think about them too. We need to think about both, right? And so if you ask this question, you are going to learn about how the teacher is differentiating. What is their plan? Is there a plan? There needs to be a plan. It is better when this is proactive. And so this gives us insight into what are their differentiation practices, what are they doing? And it really becomes a jumping off point to a discussion on differentiation. So many teachers identify differentiation as a learning goal. So here in Texas, we have T-tests, and a lot of teachers will put differentiation as one of the domains that they want to work on for the year. And so I think it's important that we learn what the baseline is. What is their approach to differentiation? You know, are they looking at it as the process as it should be? It's a process, right? So there are a lot of clear opportunities here to talk about differentiation. And again, I get more into this in the book, and I also get more into this in the online course. So how do you collect data? And so I think this is the one where I think you have the most learning opportunity, especially with new teachers, because there's a lot of practice. Your first couple years teaching, right? You're in survival mode, like what is happening? And so we need to learn, you know, where they are in terms of okay, so it's one thing to assess, but what do you do with that assessment? Are we giving feedback to students? Are we doing that in a timely manner? Are we using feed forward practices, basically where we're using that data to plan our instruction, right? Are we using the answers in that exit ticket to make groups for the next day? Or are we using it to, change up our instruction because we figured out the kids either didn't learn something they needed to learn, or they're really proficient in something that we were going to spend another day on? How do we let data drive those decisions, right? If we look at a little quiz we give and it's clear they didn't get it, we need another day on that, right? How are we going to make that? How are we responsive and flexible? How do we plan assessments? This is where you can talk. These are great things for data discussions. But this is where you can talk about feedback and feed forward practices, how they're talking about data, coaching conversation. I had a new teacher, and I asked her, how are you using the data? How are you collecting data? And she goes, honestly, I don't know what you mean. And it was just, she was new. She needed to chat about it with me. We needed to talk through it. It made a lot of sense to her once we talked about it, but that was a teachable moment. And she felt comfortable to ask and not just make up an answer. She was just like, I need some help with that. And so these questions give you the opportunity to do that. And so where can you use these questions? And I'm going to go one more time. I'm going to check and see if I have any questions on any of the platforms that I hope to be going live on. So give me 1 second. I don't know why Apple Books just popped up. That's very bizarre. Cancel. Gotta love technology. Okay, so I don't know what's happening there. Okay, well, I will, since it looks like it's being problematic being live, I will definitely post this to YouTube so that everybody can see it. So where can you use these questions? Everywhere. I mean, it really depends on your role in the campus. So if you're running the professional learning community, whether you be the coach or you be the veteran teacher or the leader of the PLC, you can use them there. You can use them in planning sessions. So these can be an after the fact question, or they can be a before the fact question. You can use it after an post-observation conversation, a coaching conversation. If you are the T-test administrator, they can be part of your T-test conversations. And in the book, by the way, I have T-test alignments to each of the questions. So that's an added bonus of having the book as a resource, because you can see that. You could also use these in data meetings. How are you using data? How are you assessing, to learn a little bit more about data practices. So those are some places you can use these questions all the time. Like, to me, they need to be in your instructional planning. They need to be in your lesson planning. If you can answer these questions on a daily basis, you're in really good shape, because you've planned, you've been proactive, you're thinking about all of the elements you need to. And again, the questions are the jumping off point. There's going to be follow-up questions, coaching conversations, follow-up meetings. So I did put the link, and I can put it up there again, and I can show you where it is actually. So I am doing an online on-demand course. It's now available. You can sign up. I still need to activate it and make it live, but you can go ahead and sign up. I'll make it live in the next couple days. So let me show you where those resources. Let me show you some of my resources, by the way. Let me make sure. I'm going to stop my share for a second. Let me show you where you can get some resources for guiding questions, whether you have the book or not. Of course, I highly recommend the purchase of. So let's share my desktop. And this always ends up being in the wrong spot. Okay. So this is my website. So there's information on here. The course that I was talking about is an on-demand course. You can pre-sign up right now, pre-order available. If you can use the coupon code FB follower, If you use the code FB follower, you will get a discount. I'll put that on the slide. I also have my Prepping for Hybrid Learning on there. And then, so this is the course. FB follower will get you a discount. And I'll put that, when I post this on YouTube, I'll put that coupon code in the information. Yes, please subscribe to my website so you can get ongoing information. There's also, like I said, there's information in my blog. And if you go down here, I'll show you what it. So there we go, sneak peek guiding questions. So there's why guiding questions. So there's a little bit more insight into why I wrote it. And then there's actually a sneak peek excerpt. So if you want a little bit more information about that, you can actually read part of one of the chapters, and that'll give you some insight into what you'll be looking at. So those are some of the options that you have in terms of that. So where did I go? All right. So that's really the overview of guiding questions. Tells you a little bit more about it. Again, if you were late onto the broadcast, it's really about having good quality conversations between admin and teachers, instructional coaches and teachers, teachers like teacher leaders and newer teachers, or just teachers in a group, teachers for reflection. Because like I said, if you can answer these questions about what you're doing, you know you're doing a good job. You know that you are looking at the big picture. The ultimate goal for me is that we have great collaborative conversations that are out of mutual respect and trust, and that teachers don't feel attacked and don't get defensive. Because like I said, once the teacher is defensive, or once there's defensiveness in a group, you've lost that conversation. Like, that trust is gone. And if you want to have this great collaborative conversation where you're planning and you're growing, I mean, the end goal is growth. Like, we want to all get better. Like, growth is a big thing. If we don't have that, we've lost that moment, and we don't want to lose that. There's so few, like, time is so of the essence. We don't want to lose that moment. And so even if you don't use these questions, just really think about how you're talking to each other and what you want out of a conversation, right? We don't want gotcha conversations. We want conversations where everybody can learn and be better, and we can be a team, and we can build trust and all of those different things. And that's really what guiding questions is about. Guiding questions, it gives you a set of questions to ask. But it's the jumping off point. It's the beginning. It's how can I pose a question that allows a teacher to reflect and give me more information. So maybe I didn't see something, but it was there. I'm giving the teacher the opportunity to tell me that, rather than assuming it wasn't there, right? Sometimes we, what they say about assume. So don't assume it didn't happen, but if you ask the teacher, they might tell you something that really changes your mind about what you saw. Maybe you didn't see all of her, status of the class notes. Maybe you didn't see that because you weren't in for that time, right? A lot of times walkthroughs are like 15 minutes. I didn't see the beginning, I didn't see the end, but if I talk and have this great conversation, I might understand how, well, this is an interesting class, but through these conversations, I understand how it connects to the class before it, the class after it, how it goes in the entire unit. And that's important, right? We want teachers to feel heard. We want teachers to feel understood. And conversations like this that give them the opportunity for not only the self-reflection, but to share their ideas, right? To talk about the work that they're doing is very, very important. So really think about that. I will continue to post more information about guiding questions on YouTube. Like I said, the course that I have, the on-demand online course, goes in depth to all the questions. It asks you to reflect. It asks you to look at different scenarios. And so it really takes a deeper dive. And then, of course, online discussions are in there too. So I can jump in and discuss with you and get a little bit deeper. And of course, I also offer my consulting services. You can email me at the information, and I'll put this all in the YouTube information. And I can put that on there. And please reach out to me if you have questions. I'm clearly passionate about this. I think it's a really important piece of professional development. And so that is all I have for today. Hopefully, you got an overview of what the book is and what it does, and why it might be useful to you in your role as either an administrator, instructional coach, a teacher leader, or just a teacher who wants to reflect more on their practice. We don't take enough time to do that. Life is busy, life is crazy, but we need to take time to reflect on our practice. And the questions in here allow us to do that, right? It's about productive conversations and planning. And those I think are key to where we're going. So maybe this becomes your summer reading, right? It's summer. So maybe this becomes your summer reading. Maybe do a little summer learning with the online course. And of course, feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Again, my name is Kristen Henry. I'm with KH Literacy Education. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, on my KH Literacy Education YouTube channel. And of course, my website, www.khliteracyeducation.com. I hope to hear from you and see you again soon.